Welcome to the Center Mid Philosopher. This episode is brought to you by Augustus Royale Fashion. Life's not black and white, it's gray, and gray is beautiful. Check out the brand below in the link. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this week's episode of the Center Mid Philosopher. We have we're unbelievably honored to have such an esteemed guest in Dr. and Professor Andrei Markovits, PhD in political science, MBA, and Masters of Philosophy from Columbia University. Very famous author of numerous books around the beautiful game of soccer. One of which is Offside Soccer and American Exceptionalism, Gaming the World, How Sports Are Reshaping Global Politics and Culture, Sportista, Female Fandom in the United States. Most recently, his memoir entitled The Passport Home, Comfort in Rootlessness. I could go on and on and on. He's been a frequent guest of our beloved and rest in peace, our favorite Grant Wall, friend of the show, Dr. Pavel Brunson. So, Dr. Markovits, thank you so much and welcome.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be on this show and can't wait to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, the honor is all ours, and I pinching myself that someone as esteemed and intelligent and famous would even come on. So thank you so much. And so just to start, you've had such a cool upbringing and coming from Europe and coming over to the States. And I wondered if you could just sort of tell the listeners and the viewers and myself a little bit more about your love affair with soccer in particular, and what drove you to write so much about it, and how you came to love the sport.
Sure. I mean, my love of soccer goes back to my early childhood in Timișoara, Romania, where I was born, which was a trilingual city. It was Romanian, of course, but also Hungarian and German. And I grew up in this middle-class Jewish family of just my mother, my father, and me. Holocaust-ravaged family, and born in 48, and very early on, as a little boy, I bonded with my father over soccer. And we went those are the games were on Sunday. We went to see our beloved Știința Timișoara, which was the university team. And I became a passionate fan of the university team. And they, above all, when, of course, the hated bigs from Bucharest came, we always went to the big derbies, and above all, the team, the army team, which later was called Steaua.
Oh, yeah.
And Steaua actually won the European Champions League in, I think, 87 or 83 or 80, something like that. And then there was, of course, the secret service team, Dinamo. All the Dinamo teams in Eastern Europe were actually part of the secret service.
Wow.
And there was the army team, then there was the locomotives, who were actually part of the railroad workers teams. And I loved Știința, and then we listened to radio a lot from Radio Budapest, and of course heard the wonderful exploits of the famous Arany Csapat in Hungarian, the Golden Team, the magnificent Magyars, who destroyed England 6-3 in Wembley and then 7-1 in Népstadion in Budapest. And they were the most favored to win the World Cup and lost to West Germany, and arguably the biggest upset. Other than, of course, there was only one bigger upset. In 1915, Belo Horizonte, when the U.S. beat England 1-0, goal by Getchens, who later on was killed by the Tonton Macoute, the thugs of the Duvalier regime in his native Haiti. And that was the biggest upset. By the way, completely unknown at the time in America. Completely. No one knew about this. It was huge. It's the biggest upset. I always argue in my sports course, very popular course, that actually it's a much bigger upset than our beating the Soviets in 1980 in Lake Placid.
Wow.
I mean, that was the gap was big, but after all, this was a good college team, and Wisconsin players and Minnesota and Boston College, Boston University, they all went on to the NHL. Not stars, but still, but our team beating the mighty English in 1950, who for the first time arrived to play in the World Cup, to deign to play in the World Cup, because of course before that they never did. The World Cup was for the world and not for us, and we were the best, so the English thought. And we beat them, and still the biggest upset in World Cup history. Anyway, 1954, Hungarians defeat to Germany, which, by the way, ruined Hungarian soccer to this day. Hungarian soccer never recovers from this.
Yeah, I remember reading about that.
It leads Germany to its glorious Wirtschaftswunder, and also to become an accepted member of the world of nations, and after the horrors of the Holocaust, and so of course known in Germany as das Wunder von Bern, the miracle of Bern, and in Hungary it's seen as the hell of Bern. To us, my father and me, the most important thing was to my father that this happened on the 4th of July, and that this was the birthday of the United States of America. And my father said, I was at this time not quite 6 years old, that this hopefully will be the most important thing from this match for me. And it really was, ultimately coming to America. I, to this day, know the 11 starters of the Hungarian team. There are a couple of soccer teams that will always know by heart, namely the Hungarian 54, the Brazilians of 58, who were then the first I saw later on when we actually left Romania in 58. I saw the 17-year-old amazing phenom called Pelé, who dazzled the world and destroyed the French and the Swedes single-handedly and won the World Cup.
Wow.
And another very important event of 1958 was, of course, February 6, 1958, when we hear on the radio in Romania that this English team called Manchester United crashed at Flughafen Riem in Munich. I had no idea what Manchester United was or who they were, but this really shook me up. And had it been Bolton Wanderers or Burnley or Arsenal or whoever, I would have fallen in love with them, never to leave. And this is exactly what happened to me in United. So I became a United fan on the 6th of February 1958, and have remained such relentlessly to this day.
Well, and you had mentioned to me, like, so that was the Busby Babes, right? And you had asked me via email, because you and I are kindred spirits, and one of which is our love for Manchester United. And so that's so cool to hear that's how you fell in love with them. And you asked me what drew me to them, and it's very similar to what you just said. It kind of all goes back to our relationship with my father. When we were young in the States, you couldn't watch very much. You just kind of got what you could get. And I'll never forget, it probably would have been late 80s, early 90s. It was the Man City versus Manchester United. Man U was down 3-0, and they came roaring back and won 4-3. I remember watching that with my dad, and we both were just completely captivated, and we were hooked from that on, and have been diehard Man U ever since. And so I'm so glad you told me that story of you coming to love Man U.
Yeah, no, I think these are lasting impressions, and what political science is not path dependent, and critical juncture, which then leads to your path that you just don't ever deviate from.
Mm-hmm.
And so Man United became this. And so we arrived then in Vienna in 1958, and I became a fan of Austria Wien, which is one of the so-called Jew clubs that my student and dear friend Pavel Brunson analyzed in his brilliant dissertation on the four European Jew clubs: Ajax, Tottenham Hotspur, Bayern Munich, and Austria Wien. Mm-hmm. There's actually a fifth one, MTK Budapest, which I know very well, but I just I just could not bring myself to make Pavel learn Hungarian to do that. I mean, that would have been just cruel. He learned Dutch. His English is flawless. German is his native tongue, but I could not make him learn Hungarian. So there's actually a couple of sidebars in the dissertation on MTK, but it's not salient. So anyway, I become an Austria Wien fan, and we go with my father. It's all my father. It's all about like the memoir is really an homage to my father,
Yeah.
and I become this Austria Wien fan. But above all, then of course I start. We immigrate to the United States. I start my relationship to the U.S., which actually is every summer between 1960 and 1967. I go to various games in Randall's Island. When I'm here in the summer, I see Pelé again with Santos. By the way, Santos just got relegated.
I know. I saw that, and they're
the first time ever.
I
Anyway,
know. Yeah.
So incredible. So
Yeah.
so I I go to these matches even in New York, even though, of course, when in New York, I associate everything with the New York Yankees, and I become, again, sort of path dependent since the age of 12. I become this Yankees fan, and, then the rest is history. I go to the World Cup in 1966. I attend the final.
Wow.
I see the goal, to which, of course, to me will always be a goal. There's no question. The famous, goal number 3, and go to the World Cup in 1974 again with my father in Munich, where we're rooting heavily, of course, for the brilliant Orange, the Dutch with Johan Cruyff, and they fail, then I attend the World Cup of 1982, the World Cup of 1990 in Spain, in Italy, 1994 in the U.S. I go to a number of games in Foxborough, but also in Stanford, and on and on. I've been to a number of European Champions League finals. In Wembley, Ajax against Panathinaikos.
Wow.
And then Bayern Porto in Vienna. But the first one, which was in fact Inter against Real in 1964.
In your book, I loved that chapter so much about you taking your girlfriend at the time and how you just did that beautifully. It was really about just coming of age, and then how you guys drifted apart and into the 60s and so forth. But that that your affection of that experience was that you kind of got to show off to your girlfriend at the time, and your dad kindly gave you the tickets, and it was Inter versus Real Madrid, like one of the most historic games of all time. I wondered, like, you just listed some of the most epic. What would be like your top 3 to 5 best games you've ever seen? I mean, I can't even imagine.
Best games I've ever seen. I mean, that's very hard, but the one thing that actually still bothers me about that amazing event is that I went with my girlfriend, whom I wanted to impress no end. She was my first girlfriend, and who didn't know the first thing about anything, and whatever. And I think we broke up 6 weeks later, whatever. Sure. And here I did not go with my father, and my father, this wonderful man who actually literally sacrificed his ticket and gave up his ticket to go for me, and he was so much looking forward to go with his son for the tour. The first time there was actually a European Champions League final in Vienna, and it was between Real Madrid and Inter Milan. And actually, Real Madrid still had Puskás on it, although already declining.
Unbelievable.
But, unbelievable. And who, of course, with whom my father more or less sort of grew up on the other side of the Romanian-Hungarian border, listening to them, whatever. And ultimately, I go with Daphne, who, may she rest in peace. She died when she was 50. I mean, it's a wonderful story.
It is.
The greatest games, I can tell you a couple. One I will never forget, ever in Seville, semifinal France, Germany, 1982. The French lead 3-1, and they ultimately lose. With that, this was the great Platini team.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Platini, Gires, whatever, and this is where Schumacher actually ends Batistone's career. He actually maims him more or less. He never apologized for that. The German goalkeeper, disgusting. I never forget that. That match was just epic. I mean, I will never, ever, ever forget it. We flew in. We were staying in Madrid for the World Cup, but we flew in for the game from Madrid to Seville, and we saw that.
Wow.
It was just an amazing, amazing game.
That's awesome.
I'm sure there are a couple of other. I assume you mean games that I attended in person.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you've just mentioned you saw Pele in person. You saw Cruyff in person. I mean, that's.
Yeah. Arguably, again, the 1966 World Cup final.
Yeah. Wow.
66 World Cup final, 82 semifinal. Offhand, I mean, there were just so many, but they blur. I mean, on the club level, clearly, United, Bayern in the Camp Nou.
Wow. Were you there for that?
No, actually, I was not there for that.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sorry. No, I was not there for that. So actually, back to again for where I was there for. I think I can't. A Dutch, Holland, Italy match, which just somehow blurs where it was, but it was an amazing game in which Cruyff again played brilliantly.
Wow.
And yeah. Holland, Brazil.
Wow.
At the 74 World Cup, where the Dutch just literally destroyed Brazil.
Wow.
Phenomenal match. So there were a couple of these, and all memorable and important and wonderful.
Man.
Even a great United match against Newcastle at Old Trafford, 5-3. Where actually, interestingly, Alan Shearer scored his 100th goal for Newcastle, making him the only English player to score 100 goals for two different clubs.
Wow.
So I was there, and with Bartes was the United keeper.
Yeah.
And Gabriel Heinze played on that game. I think
Ruud
van Nistelrooy. So that was also an amazing match. I just remember United prevailing ultimately 5-3. Yeah.
That's awesome. So you opened the door for Man United talk. I want to get your latest and greatest. Of course, we had a good result this week, sitting Rashford, which may have been the right thing to do, although I hate it for him. But I'd love to get your take on Man U right now. What are they going to do? How much are the Glazers to blame? How much do you like Ten Hag? Yes or no? What's the path forward?
Oh my God! If I knew this, I would immediately hang up. Would immediately fly to Manchester, take over Old Trafford, and become the hero of the hour.
Yeah.
The Glazers are horrid.
Yeah.
They are. You know what really bothers me about them is they are not only they're cheap in spirit. There's something about them which is just really low class. Not sending anyone, not being there for Sir Bobby's memorial is just disgusting. I mean, there's no, they just have no. Literally, they have no taste. They have no demeanor. They are just completely. That to me bothers me the most. That they actually don't care. They seem to be. I'm not even sure that they're only out for money. I'm sure they are, but I hate them.
Yeah.
But having said that, I also see somewhat of a disconnect between that, which I just discussed, and I hope that they leave but they, unfortunately they haven't, and they've been the bane of my existence, by virtue of what kind of their posture is and it's a form of neglect. It's disgusting.
It is.
They just, classless people. But that's disconnect between that and what goes on the field.
Right.
Meaning, not being able to string three decent passes, together, and really that has nothing to do with the Glazers per se. Do you know what I'm saying? In other
Yeah.
words, that we sometimes. I mean, our game against Newcastle was a joke. I mean, it
Oh,
was
it's awful.
really embarrassing. I mean, and that is not. I don't think the players there go, oh, the Glazers are horrible. We hence don't play well or something.
Right.
So they're two different things.
That's right.
And why such good players perform so poorly and so inconsistently, I just can't really grasp. I mean, is Ten Hag a good coach? I mean, he certainly was with Ajax. Look, there's something that kind of worries me when you really think about how many good players come to United and deteriorate.
I
This
know.
is not good.
It's
I mean,
troubling.
think about how many great players we received from Dortmund, Kagawa, Mkhitaryan,
Yeah.
Sancho. I mean, these were
Yeah.
they were world beaters. They were. I mean, wasn't Kagawa the best player in the Bundesliga, MVP or something? I mean, they were great players, and then something happens.
Yeah, and Mkhitaryan's doing great for Inter now. And
Exactly.
yeah.
He actually went from us to somewhere else before he went to Inter.
Right.
Didn't he? Anyway, and so clearly, I mean, he had some moments for United, to be sure.
Sure.
And but they just deteriorate.
Yep.
And I this is not good. I mean, whatever it is it the pressure? Is it the atmosphere? Is it the coach? But these are different coaches. This happened under Mourinho. It happened under I forget now who the was it? Maybe even Van Gaal.
Solskjaer. Whom I love,
So
but-
clearly, what I just described about this deterioration is a worry. I mean, never mind Sanchez. The guy, the Chilean guy from Arsenal, who was phenomenal.
And also at Inter now doing fairly well. I mean, he didn't start, but he's had a couple key goals.
Where?
At Inter.
Oh, he's also at Inter.
He's also at Inter. He started in
Wow,
the Champions League and scored at least one, maybe two. Yeah.
Oh wow! It
Yeah.
seems like Inter with Lukaku, and then it's like the Man United.
It's like you go to Man U to get your career destroyed, and then you go to Inter to get it resurrected. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah. So, I know a lot about the sport. I know a lot about its history. I know a lot. I mean, I've written whatever, but I actually don't think I can give you a good answer here. I mean, but something is not right. I mean, clearly, there is no question that the club got away with and emphasized being sort of just glamorous and selling jerseys, and which is fine. I don't see anything wrong with that in and of itself. But Ed Woodward was no winner, to be sure. I mean, clearly having him in charge was not good.
No.
And even I would also argue that losing someone of the stature of Sir Alex, has to be followed by a letdown.
Oh yeah, there's inevitable. I mean, there's no way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Max Weber, the great German sociologist, teaches us that after every major charismatic leader, there is a hiatus. It's just very difficult to take on the mantle of charisma for someone else. It's impossible.
It's like a mathematical inevitability almost.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so partly the letdown was that as well. And his glory years will never be replicated. Anyway, I'm very. What makes it even worse for me in some level, and I'm sure on some level, and for you too, I'm sure, is not only that United are just so inconsistent and not happy. It's just not a. It doesn't exude a kind of things going well. But it, of course, coincides with the glory of two of our most bitter rivals, namely Liverpool
Yep.
and United. Yep. And I really, really rue the day because I really think we could have had Klopp.
Oh man, I know that would have been
And
epic.
Klopp would have been Klopp. Klopp is a United kind of guy, meaning Klopp plays the kind of football that would have thrived at United.
Absolutely, he's a great
And
coach.
I think he would have been anyway. So it goes, and
So it goes, right? Nice.
there's a complete exclusivity between the two clubs because one could of course imagine that he could actually come to United, but of course he will never do that.
Yeah.
Unlike even the exclusivity is even higher than between Real Madrid and Barcelona. So if you were the manager at Liverpool, you'll never ever join United.
Yeah, well, I love the Vonnegut reference there, and so it goes. But I wanted to change tact a little bit, and I know it's going to be so challenging for you to encapsulate an incredible book and work on, gaming the world and how short sports are reshaping global politics and culture. But one of the central themes amongst that book is the juxtaposition of soccer, in particular football, being an agent of globalization, while at the same time further cementing antagonistic regionalism. I was just wondering, frankly, for my own benefit, but just to spend time with you, but for the viewers and listeners, if you could kind of explain that concept a little bit more, because it's fascinating and it's actually one of the central themes of our show that we constantly revisit. I just thought it was so fascinating, and if you could just illuminate us all, that would be so cool.
Sure. You meaning the glocalism?
Yeah, the kind of how soccer and football are agents of globalization on one end, but it's also on the complete other side has further cemented antagonistic regionalism also.
Right.
Just kind of like an example or two of each, and how they kind of the good and bad of it. I mean, there's so many different directions we could go, but I just found it fascinating.
Yeah. Well, sure. Look. The game has become, first of all, the game from the late 19th century, when it actually is exported from England, it really conquers the European continent and Latin America very quickly. And it actually was always a misnomer to call it a global game, because there were major parts of the world where actually did not play soccer, which were the cricket countries and the rugby countries and various other places where it didn't exist, or very minoritarianly, like in the North American continent, Australia, and so on and so forth. And basically, the argument is that starting in the late 70s and early 80s, it really starts becoming a global game, meaning that it now is obviously about to flourish, although maybe not yet conquer, but flourish in the United States, in Canada, et cetera, et cetera. And it is the global game, although there are other global games, basketball being one. And that this is a phenomenal development of really universalizing it and actually creating a form of universal bond. I mean, we can now, through jersey, we can talk to people who are, Messi, and look at the Messi jersey. It's just incredible. Or so that in fact globalization is in many ways a very universalizing and actually democratizing and good thing. See, I argue always globalization actually is enlightening. Okay, but at the same time, you have local that ultimately in sports, the authentic is always pre-capitalist. It's so interesting. It's actually not money, but it's actually pre-money or pre-capitalist entities that really give a sport its authenticity to those that follow it. So, for example, it's not Man City is less authentic than Burnley, meaning it is something about local, the pre-capitalist, the pre-monetary thing that make it authentic. I worked on a paper which actually looks in the United States and that places like Buffalo or Detroit
Mm-hmm.
or Pittsburgh are much more authentic than Miami, LA, and Phoenix,
Sure.
and that in fact hardship or 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 non-monetary dimensions, including, by the way, not necessarily success,
Mm-hmm.
but almost
Yeah.
struggle to overcome, is authentic and lends it authenticity. And this is a very, very powerful in soccer. Uh, Actually, in all sports. I just gave example for America, which is it's not about soccer, but and that sort of cements a form of tribalism,
Yeah.
and the tribalism, which is actually very, on some level, very nice because it is a form of a Gemeinschaft, of a community, of really something very dear and strong, is also one of antagonism. So basically, sports have two kinds of capital: bridging capital, which is the globalizing, that you now leave your place in North Carolina and you arrive in Bangkok, and there is clearly a form of bridging capital between you and these other people, or
Sure.
via United, or very just even the game of soccer. But it's also bonding capital, and the bonding capital is the tribal one. And the tribal one is actually still there. And it, in fact, is sometimes accentuated as the only form of authenticity, that it's actually not the winning. The down, the downsides of city or of global clubs, of Bayern in Germany, is that it's successful, but above all because it's rich,
Mm-hmm.
and richness actually is a form of, almost like it's a schimpfword, is almost a pejorative. Even though we all strive for it, but it's really the struggles that make us authentic. And that then leads to this form of tribalism, which interestingly is completely now part of fan culture, but not of the players. So when I was, a teenager or later, and clearly the cleavage between Rangers and Celtic
Mm.
was total in terms of not only the fans but the players.
Mm-hmm.
Today, the players are global.
Right.
The fans are local.
Right.
So, in fact, localism is cherished as a form of authenticity by the fans,
Mm-hmm.
and is, I mean, look at it all. It's all the German fans kind of delight in the fact that they're pre-capitalist. This is what makes them authentic. So that's the tension that exists, and which on the whole is very very common, on some level not even objectionable. The where it becomes objectionable is that it becomes also a form of exclusion, of violence, etc., which actually is unique to soccer. And I've developed some thoughts about why that is the case,
Mm-hmm.
but it very much links to this form of tribalism, which also, of course, has a very strong male characteristic and
Sure.
other things.
That's fascinating, and that was really cool. And thank you for that. I also wanted to change tact a little bit because this is another topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is soccer in America and the constant struggle for it to get over the hump. And you've written quite a bit about why that is the case, why it's been such a challenge. And there's so many incredible themes there. But one that I was just really fascinated by was you talked about the period of from 1870 to 1930 or thereabouts in America in particular, where there was this hyper sense of nationalism and trying to establish America's kind of identity, and sports took a major role in that. And a lot of these sports were kind of cemented and ossified in the American
Uh,
mind that we can't ever quite seem to supplant. Like I constantly think of ESPN and Sports Center and pardon the interruption with Kornheiser and Wilbon. I love that show, love those guys, but like Kornheiser is the total. He is basically that. He's the personification of this argument.
Yes.
Like he just will not
Yes.
let it into his mind, body, and soul. And I just wonder if you could explain to myself and the viewers and listeners why that's the case and what took place during that time frame that basically just made it impossible for soccer to dethrone the likes of baseball, football,
Yeah.
basketball, and even some extent hockey.
Yeah. Well, the argument is about the frozen party space. This comes from political science, and the argument is that with the rise of industrialization and then the entering of mass politics in terms of the vote, what happens is that parties by the end of World War One become sort of the space in all these advanced industries. It's not only America, becomes frozen. There's a very, very famous argument in political sociology, and I transformed this from politics to sports, meaning that by the end of World War One, if you look at the sports space of all these countries, the advanced industrial societies, England, France, Germany, whatever, they actually remain more or less the same, meaning that the barrier of entry after 1920 becomes very high because between 1870, 1880, 1890, with the formation of the working class, the male industrial working class, you develop the carriers of modern mass sports. And in the United States, that happens to have been baseball. It happens to have been football, which actually there's a whole story about this why Harvard doesn't play, and actually could have been soccer, but whatever. But that's another podcast. And basically, the United States actually develops three sports, which is really unique. Most countries only have one.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what I call the American sports space, or the culture for the sports culture, has a limited space, and that is actually taken up by three sports, actually even four with hockey. So by the time soccer arrives, or soccer wants to have a chance, it actually doesn't. It's already too late. And the reason that soccer is played already in the 1880s, no problem. But in fact, it always constituted itself as non-American. It sees itself as foreign. It remains. It's actually a very interesting contrast to basketball. Basketball has many, many ethnic leagues. The South Philadelphia Hebrew Association, the Sfas of Philly, the Buffalo Germans. They have all kinds of ethnic groups that actually create basketball. But but what is more important is the other part of the hyphen. It's the American. So the German Americans, they're Jewish Americans, but the American part remains essential. In soccer, it actually is the other one. So they remain actually more Hungarian or more Italian. There's a great study about basically the Hill in St. Louis, which looks at where Joe Garagiola is from, and also, of course, Yogi Berra.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows that if you, for some reason, identified more as Italian rather than American, you actually play soccer.
Right.
So, in fact, at a time when baseball invents an entire myth to accentuate its Americanness, namely Doubleday, which has nothing to do with the game itself, but in order to actually counter the danger of England and English being the rounders, no more rounders, no more rounders. They said the Monacos, we actually are original English, American sport. And of course, it's beating or defeating cricket. Baseball becomes this hyper national American sport. Soccer actually becomes a non-American entity and always sees itself. There is this guy, the first head of American soccer is this guy, Manning, who actually is a British guy with a German medical degree. And he always prides himself on being sort of in some ways non-American. And then, of course, the disaster, the absolute disaster. Again, America being different, not better, or it's just different. The whole notion of American sports ultimately not being not having an association or a paralegal, parastatist entity called the Federation and the league. This does not exist in American sports. It's the NBA does what it wants. There is no entity above it, or the
Right.
NFL. But in soccer, there is.
Right.
And this actually leads to, I would argue, the most disastrous thing in American soccer history, namely the soccer wars of the 1920s. If you look at soccer in the 1920s, it actually was surpassing football. It was the ASL, the American Soccer League in the East Coast, is actually a very good league. And what happens is that its teams were also asked to play in the United States Open Cup. And of course, the league guys don't want them to do this. And they actually forbid them to do this. And three of the clubs actually say, no, we will still play. And, if you go still play, we will actually exclude you from the league. Whereupon the league went and actually, whereupon these clubs actually go to the American Federation, which, by the way, until 1974, always called itself the Football Association. So the word, the game's identity itself is still to this day.
Yep.
And that's one of the biggest problems. To this day is actually contested.
Yep.
I cannot tell you, Matt, I cannot tell you how often I gave various talks. And, people say, Professor Markovits, brilliant lecture, but please don't ever call this game soccer. It's football.
Right.
Say, please give me a break. This is crazy.
It is.
Football is called in America is a different sport. There's nothing wrong. You're not committing, and it's typically for very often of the weak to really become so fixated on one nomenclature, on one aspect. It's really like a form of a clanism, or like a clannish form of trying to actually be completely holier than thou. Mm-hmm. And the point is that this in and of itself bespeaks a form of insecurity. And so basically, to come back by 1930, the league actually falls apart because, of course, the federation excludes the league and makes it a renegade league because it doesn't have its clubs play in the cup competition. And this duality, it does not exist in America, in American sports, and leads the league to actually decline. Soccer would have had a chance to make it. It doesn't. And then it just, these sports become their own. It's like a locomotive. Mm-hmm. Culture becomes, all the accoutrements, the colors, the tastes, the sounds all become part of a culture, which becomes stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And there's limited space, and it's very hard for soccer to make it. But, I'm actually optimistic that probably not before I die, but I really am optimistic that the United States will, in fact, develop soccer as a clear number 5, despite Tony Kornheiser. And by the way, it's amazing you said the same thing, because I actually love the show.
I love Kornheiser,
I watch it
soccer
all the time. And for him, I wish I could actually come through to him and tell him, Tony, he almost sees it a form of pride that he's ignorant about soccer.
Well, he's like the perfect representation of, I actually view him as an intellectual guy. He's really smart, but he's just defiant. And he is the personification of this argument, in that he just refuses to let it in because he does view it as other. And of the many themes that we talk about on this show, one that we keep coming upon time and time again is that of xenophobia, and how so many of these derbies around the world are rooted in, we're from this country, you're other. And to someone like Kornheiser, who's a smart, sophisticated guy, it's still perceived as other. And I thought, he's a perfect example. And there was, in one of your books, I literally got up, went into the other room, told my wife, I was like, look at this, I've been saying this, and we say this on the show. And again, I'm being hypocritical because I'm about to say this, and I embrace other. I embrace all ethnicities in this country, but not everyone does. And we talk about how so many, to this day, it's like, if you're going to have a soccer show, well, you got to have a British guy. or you got to have
Oh,
and you argue that that's actually further hindered the advancement of the sport and that's kind of one of the things that we're trying to do with our little rinky-dink show here is to say, hey, listen, we're American Joe Sixpack, as you may want to, but we can pontificate as intellectually as anybody in the world on Real Madrid, Barcelona, Manchester United, Man City, Serie A, La Liga, you name it, and be American. We don't have to get in a European or South American just to make it credible. We're trying
well,
we're trying to forge our way into this world.
but precisely because we are new at this, precisely because of that, we're culturally insecure. And we're culturally insecure, and because of that, or not I, believe me, but basically are again. This is about this clannishness. This is about this sort of that you can't use the word soccer because if you do, you clearly are an apostate. You are actually not the real deal. And the
Right.
real deal means that you have to speak with a British accent.
Right.
And this, of course, adds to, I think, in general, and I see this with all my dear Australian friends who agree with me totally, that this is still the power of sort of British colonialism.
Yep.
And even though we defeated British colonialism in 1776, actually culturally we never did. And culturally, there is this thing of if you are in fact a cosmopolitan in America, you are actually also embracing the world, which in this case also meaning embracing a form of Britishness,
It's like you're a
which in
traitor or
fact
something.
means, I mean, it's so look, the Americans valorize British accents. If we didn't, the Beatles would have not made it so quickly as they did, and the whole English invasion was partly, not totally, but partly predicated on the fact that here were these amazing British stars who actually import African American blues music from Chicago, above all the Stones, but however they speak with a British accent, which of course Americans love, and so the instant authenticity. Again, back to authenticity, that I talked about before about when we talked about rivalries or when we talked about the thing about localism. Authenticity is crucially important to creating anything new, and you convey authenticity in soccer by speaking with the British accent. I think it's it doesn't bother me, but I think it's horrible.
I
I
do
think
too.
it's very sad that you don't have more I mean, can you imagine Grant Wall,
Right.
the late Grant Wall? I mean, excuse me, Grant Wall could be a soccer guru on any show, any day, any time.
Yeah,
I mean,
anywhere in
no
the world.
question.
Right.
Okay, he is a towering figure in this world of what was. I mean, amazing. And I doubt whether he would have been. I mean, Fox had him on for various World Cups like after various sort of coming on the show and talking about. But basically, it still has to be a British accent, which there's in and of itself there's nothing wrong with that. But I think in some ways it underlines that it's still not quite American.
Yeah.
And Tony Kornheiser, whom I totally like, just like you do, and I love the show,
Yeah.
almost makes it a point of pride.
Oh yeah.
Not know. I mean, this is a guy who's so into knowing things, and then when it comes to soccer, he actually you could feel you could
Shuts a
almost
wall.
sense his pride that he loves to be ignorant.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I almost wanted to say, Tony, being ignorant at your level is not a point of pride in anything.
I know.
Okay?
I know. Well, Dr. Markovits, as we discussed this, emailed about how there's going to be way too much for Stephen to talk about to do in one episode, and you said we're going to have to do two. I'm actually thinking this might have to be a 3-part series if I beg you. But I want to first of all thank you, but I want to get you to, because we're not going to be able to get to all the best ofs, but I'll ask 2 best ofs. Well, number one, I want to get your all-time Manchester United perfect 11, but then also I would be remiss if I did not mention to the viewers and listeners another passion that Dr. Markovits and I share is the love of the Grateful Dead. And yeah, and Dr. Markovits, for those that don't know, has attended 150 Grateful Dead shows in his life, which is just unreal, and wanted to get your perfect Grateful Dead set list. So we'll do that. We'll do those two best ofs, and we'll save the others for the next episodes. But if you could just give us your perfect Man U starting 11, and then your
Okay, so
perfect
perfect
Grateful
Man
Dead
U.
show.
Okay, perfect Man U starting 11. I'm actually debating. I've thought about this. I wanted to have Schmeichel in there,
Oh, you got to.
but maybe actually David De Gea at
Ooh,
his peak.
wow.
At his peak, like in 2016, 17, unbelievable.
I love it.
So
Yeah.
Schmeichel,
Curveball.
then clearly Neville, Rio Ferdinand, Nemanja Vidic, Evra, the in midfielders would be definitely Paul Scholes,
Oh yeah.
definitely Roy Keane, definitely Ryan Giggs.
Oh yeah.
And the front would be George Best, Wayne Rooney, and Ronaldo.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And then, so I get two Grateful Dead questions. Give us your perfect Grateful Dead set list, and then also, again, for those Deadhead aficionados out there, Dr. Markovits' favorite Grateful Dead song is "Morning Dew," one of my all-time favorites as well, possibly my number one. And wanted to get your favorite version of, or just favorite era of that. We talked about, is it Pigpen, Keith and Donna, or Brent era Morning Dew? So
Matt, you cannot tell. I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to be on this. This is insane. I love it.
oh man,
The best morning dew. Well, the best morning dew for me personally was September 27, 1969 at the
ooh,
Fillmore
love it.
East when I went to a Country Joe and the Fish
Yep,
concert and
yeah.
the Dead.
You wrote about that. It's
And
awesome.
the Country Joe and the Fish were on first, and I really, he was screaming, kind of, whatever,
You
and
say he talked too much.
it talked too much, and the F word, everything was the F word, this, that, whatever. I was loud, and then around midnight, the Dead come on, and they were announced, and nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, like 5 or 6 minutes later, sort of these folks appear on the stage. These guys don't say anything or whatever, and start tuning their instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And out of this tuning, they go into Morning Dew. And I fall in love, and I will never, to this day. And they played this
Getting chill bumps.
Morning Dew that just made me into a Deadhead from 1969 on to this day. So clearly, to me, that and they start the set that way.
Mm-hmm.
So it will be unforgettable, because typically most bands until then that I went to, always start with an upbeat, strong, "Start Me Up" by the Stones, or "Last Time," or some, and the Dead start with this slow, very
Build
mournful,
slow, yeah.
literally out of the tuning of their instruments,
Mm-hmm.
which was just something I'll never. I think arguably though the best version maybe on Europe '72.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I love that. I also I have a lot of Deadhead friends that have grown, getting a little bit more and more into the '80s, the Brent era. They love that stuff, and I'm a early Dead. I like a little bit faster Morning Dew, a little bit bluesier. I love the Pigpen influence. Like, of course, he's never the protagonist, but just his influence on those earlier days was a little bit chunkier. I just kind of liked it. I love it.
Yeah, I'm actually sort of in between. To me, I'm a definitely Keith
Oh
Keith
yeah,
Gotcha guy.
sure.
I mean, those '70s shows, my God, '73, '74, '77,
Oh yeah.
Lakeland, Florida. I went to. I mean, it's just incredible.
'77 Ithaca Cornell, right?
Ithaca,
That's some say
Cornell,
the
and then
best show of all time.
and actually, I saw them a few days later, or was it sometime in May, in Lakeland, Florida. Incredible. So to me, it's really the. I also love the great Yamaha or the classic piano sound that Keith played.
Yeah, he was classically trained. Yeah.
Classically trained, but also the sound of it, and not just amazing. I mean, the concert would be something like starting with Jack Straw into Me and My Uncle, into Brown Eyed Women, into let's see, Brown Eyed Women, into oh my God, U.S. Blues. I think I wrote it to you.
Yeah, I have it here
Thank
if you
you.
want if you want some hints.
Yeah, yes, I'm cheating because
You have Brown Eyed Woman into Althea, into Deal. Deal would make my list. So would Althea.
yes,
Intermission, then you have Estimated Profit, China Cat, into Rider, Terrapin Station, Wharf Rat, Sugar Magnolia, Broke Down, Black Peter. Love that call. That's a good one. Saint Stephen's up there for me, and then closing out with Do, Encored with Box of Rain, When I Paint My Masterpiece, and So Many Roads.
there you go. I could have not, because I don't have it in front of me. I could have not done it
Well, you
straight so
nailed most
quickly.
of it. You got, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad you revealed this to the audience that what I wrote you, because yeah, exactly. And actually, to me, So Many Roads is. I just can't listen to that without crying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. And actually, I'm gonna go to see Raising the Dead, a very nice local
Oh, nice.
dead cover band, and they're playing actually at the Little Caesars Arena on Saturday, January 13th, before before the Detroit Red Wings and LA Kings game.
Nice.
And
Awesome.
it was a wonderful band. And actually, its sort of lead guitarist is a dear friend of mine. Is a professor
Oh, that's
at
awesome.
Lawrence Technical University. And I have a major request for him to play So Many Roads,
Oh,
which
cool.
is, yeah.
I would have maybe snuck in some Looks Like Rain, maybe some He's Gone, maybe some Jimmy Rowe. But anyway, so Dr. Markovits, I only got to like a third of all the incredible things I wanted to talk with you about, but I am just floored and so thankful and so grateful that you came on. You blew our minds, and as I knew you would, and just wanted to thank you profusely. And maybe we can get you on even next month or the month after. I want to. We didn't even get into the women's game. So many other great things that you have really pontificated on. I just want to say thank you for everything that you've done for this country, for the fans of soccer, and it's just an unbelievable honor.
Well, Matt, you have me on whenever you want. I'm around. Drop me a note, and we will do whatever women's game, whatever. It was a delight for me. This was just a great time, and let's do it again.
Awesome. Well, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you. Best to you and your family. Let's get those Red Devils back on track, and
Yes.
we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye, Matt.
Bye. See ya.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.